day, fellow Bitcoiners. It's another good day in Bitcoin, like every day is. I have Abundant Minds here with me, Sydney and Beau. They are an amazing and brilliant team, growing and helping others with their financial game, upping their Bitcoin mining game, and overall business strategy. No matter where you're coming from as you're dipping into Bitcoin, it's multifaceted, which we'll talk about it. Here's what I love about Abundant Minds. The ethics are solid. There's no gatekeeping, no middlemen. It's a team committed to transparency, education, and integrity, learned through the fires of the hard way and doing it right. And of course, abundance. So with me today, I have Beau Turner, the founder and CEO of Abundant Minds, and Sydney Bright, customer success lead, and my recent compadre at a self-custody workshop, which we did in Portland. I had the pleasure of sharing time with Sydney and Beau. Bitcoin is for everyone. Just this past weekend, busy weekend for us all. I learned a lot over the years what Abundant Minds is doing, teaching others to do. And I think it's super important that Bitcoiners, no matter where they're from, we all have more to learn, hear about what you're doing and the progress you're seeing as we go through this journey together. I think there's a lot we don't even know what we don't know, and you're doing a lot of innovative stuff in this space. Thank you so much for joining me, Sydney and Beau.
Thanks for having us.
Abundant Minds was the platinum sponsor of the Portland conference, and you've supported this conference for years. I think since its inception. I mean, year one, a couple of years ago when I've been to all of them. And Beau, you were up on stage. You're local to the Pacific Northwest. You provide tours out to one of your sites, I think in Cascade Locks, correct? And so that's pretty special and amazing. A field trip day. And it was at the conference a couple of years ago when I first heard of you and saw y'all, saw Beau for the first time. And it's very unique, I think. It's a special opportunity to be able to get people out on site and really be able to ask all the questions. You're very transparent. And it speaks to the corporate culture that you embody and promote, which I think is, I might say, perhaps unique in this space. Given your size and what you're doing, you're very into education and helping people understand and connect them wherever they're coming from. Tell me about that field trip that you did just Sunday. How did that go?
Having people out to site visits is one of my favorites, and I think one of the team's favorites things that we do on a recurring basis, partially because it helps people get comfortable with the vehicle, right? Most of the gap for people in getting into Bitcoin or getting into mining is usually not just an intellectual understanding, but a true level of comfort. And I think Sydney would agree with this. He talks and writes about it fairly often, that when we truly use technology and the opportunity that we have available to us to the best degree, it allows us to be more connected to the people around us. And the site visits are one aspect of that. The people that work with Sydney are another aspect of that. But truly, when we have the right tools being used the right way, it gives us the opportunity to be more connected to each other, not less. It's part of why we're so into education, empowering the investors and people that we work with, is because not only is this a great financial opportunity, it's also a great opportunity to learn about your world, to make deep connections with people who have shared sets of beliefs with you. And that has such a profound return on life, a profound return on joy, that if we can get people in because they are interested in making a financial return and get them to stay because they realize that this is a vehicle to improve your life on a broad spectrum, then that's the greatest Trojan horse we could possibly offer to people, I think. And so the site tour is one aspect of that. But in every way, we just want to connect with people and further education. Our goal is to create more Bitcoiners, not just more fiat miners.
Yeah, so much about business and the culture of Bitcoin. I mean, yeah, people can get into it for the tech or the number go up or the interesting concepts, but it's so much about relationships. I'm going to throw up the screen here real quick. There's a picture of y'all out there at one of the sites. Beautiful day. I'll just say the weather worked out, sounds like. And I cringingly, I wish I could have been there. I couldn't make it with a conflict, but I just love the fact that you do this because you're connecting people. And when you go to a conference as well, I'm sort of like Sydney and I experienced with the self-custody workshop. I can easily, come into Bitcoin as I did. I can intellectualize a lot and think about it logically and rationally and all the things. And so you go to a sort of like finding Bitcoin for the first time, and then you stay or you really connect at a conference. You go to a conference for one reason, you get there, and it's so much about the relationships, the people you meet, the conversations I had with, I was like very continually, unexpectedly just vibing with people that I'm learning from, doing different things, you all. And it's a gestalt of like more than the individual sum of its parts. There's a vibe that happened. My sense from Portland, and I'll ask you about your general takeaway from the Portland conference. It's got that local flavor. It's small. I mean, I know attendance can kind of follow fiat price because a lot of people are into it when it's easy, and when it's harder because we're in a fiat world, it's more of a intentional event. But modest turnout, but good. Everyone who was there, my impression was they're there for the right, good based reasons, or they're honestly looking to learn. What was your overall takeaway from Friday and Saturday?
Sydney, I defer to you on this one.
Sure. I mean, I think your perspective on that's quite right. Having attended multiple conferences at this point, I do find that the people going to these Portland conferences are very eager to learn. Often, many of them come to this without knowing much, which I think is just a wonderful way of doing it, because when you're new to this whole subject and you immerse yourself in an environment of people who are either also trying to learn or they're experts and they're trying to teach, it just gives a different kind of exposure to the subject over just going on the internet, watching podcasts or whatever it might be, to kind of get your information that way. And what I also find, I guess going back to also that conversation about the site tour, there's something about the visceral experience that is just better than digesting all the information on the internet. So when you go to a site tour and you see a bunch of machines and you see them hashing, you get a more intimate and deeper understanding of what Bitcoin is, rather than if you just Googled it and you read a little blog post that said, Bitcoin mining works like this. And it's the same when you go to a conference and you can feel the energy of the people around you. You can see the smiles. You can engage in conversation and perhaps have conversation you never had before, and hear of ideas you never heard before. A small anecdote: I have a friend who has gone to two conferences now. One was the big Vegas conference, not last year, but the year before. And then came to this one, and he reached out to me saying, I gained so much more from this small conference in Portland than I did in that big smorgasbord of a Vegas conference. And I think there's a lot of that. The smaller conferences are far more intimate. You build better connection, and I think it provides just that wonderful environment to really engage and really ask questions and really make connections that makes the whole learning experience far, far more valuable.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I made almost as many connections and took as many notes as I did in Vegas, 2 days in Vegas, and it's a scrum of a scene at times and everything about it. But at Portland, there was just a lot of good, clear signal and good relationships and local relationships. And kudos, I'll say, to Sydney, who was spot on, ready to present for the self-custody, whereas I was catching up and distracted a little bit. But I can be easily self-critical about, I hope that was cool and all. But you know what? Given the size of like the intro kickoff talk and then transitioning to our self-custody workshop, I thought, man, who's going to, will there be 5 or 10 people? But it was a good turnout given the split off options and the interest. And you were right, because when we were prepping for that a little bit, I was presuming a lot about, you're into Bitcoin for a little while and you kind of presume things about people who are interested or show up, and they're probably at a certain level or ready for hearing the options, hearing a little bit of the tech or the bigger picture why maybe. And it took a few minutes or so, but when I asked the question, I was like, you know what? Somebody asked, like, what's a seed phrase or what's a node? And I was like, oh, you were aware that a lot of people are going to go to that, not being all that fully aware of what self-custody is, or that you can even do it, or why would you do that? And so when I just said, you don't have to raise your hand, but if you raise your hand, if you're comfortable saying you don't take self-custody or you're not sure what it is. And I think half the audience raised their hand. I'm like, okay, we should start with like 101, right? So the education is important. And I think what I realized too is that as I orange pill or talk to people, I keep thinking ahead and thinking ahead. I think for the rest of our lives, there will always be that baseline education for people that you're going to repeat the simple concepts always, because people will always continually be starting somewhere. And you handled that very well. Sydney, what do you think of the self-custody workshop?
Well, I also thought it was nice. I appreciate the kind words. When I reflect upon that, I tend to think about, I remember when I was first getting into the subject, and I would go online and I would look up subjects about, or just presentations or whatever I could find about how to learn about Bitcoin. And every single talk always kind of had a similar kind of approach. They would talk about, cryptography and the blockchain and public-private keys and SHA-256, and it was always a very cypherpunk-like, cryptographic, computer science-oriented explanation of what this technology is. And therefore, a lot of people who get into it, I think at that time, that's just the angle which they look at it. But I think as Bitcoin evolves, people's use of it and the way they handle and approach the subject will change. There's going to be a day, I have a feeling, far into the future, where very few people even are very technical to the point where they're using a bunch of seed phrases and cold cards and stuff. I mean, there's going to be so much, you're just going to have an app on your phone that, maybe it's a full-on Lightning eCash and whatever type of things arrive all in one place. All you see is a balance, send, receive, and it's just super easy for you to use. And of course, if you accumulate a huge stash, almost a family treasury, that's when maybe one member of the family is actually going to learn how to do all that seed phrase stuff for the family and future generations. And so when you approach, that far into the future, a group of people are so new, the way in which you have to go about explaining Bitcoin to them is going to be totally different to how you explained Bitcoin maybe 10 years ago. And so I think it's a very, I suppose I contemplate it a lot as I try to educate people about Bitcoin is, what is the right approach? What angle should I direct this conversation about so they understand what's going on and they can understand, you're not hiding anything. You're giving them the true, honest explanation of what is going on, but you meet people where they're at and you meet them where they need to go. Because if you walk up to some stranger on the street and you start talking about cryptography, they're going to say, oh, I just don't see the purpose of that. Something I like to do is I like to, approach it from a point of property rights. And they go, this is a piece of property you can actually own. This is right. Something you really have in your hand. You can touch it, feel it, smell it. It's not some magic internet money. There's some stock ticker on the thing that goes up and down. That's not what this is. This is real property. Yeah. This is something that you can have, that you can pass down to your children. And it's all about that right framing to someone. And I think it's important to reflect upon how do you truly, the words matter, the way we articulate this matters. And I think that will change over time.
Yeah. And what I realized too, it kind of dawned on me as we were talking about, is that some of the concepts I had about getting people further downstream on self-custody is that, there's people here that if we were to push too hard, too far on certain aspects of self-custody, there's people that might try it, get over their skis and screw up and then be like, I thought I did what you told me to do. You can run into this in mining for sure. We can talk about that because people are like, you want to get into Bitcoin, you want to get into self-custody, you want to get into mining, and people get excited and they start going, and then they're far ahead, and then they either kind of get into some tricky trouble or make a mistake or need to unwind something. And I realized that, like when you mentioned BitKey, for example, I was like, you know what? Is it an approach I would necessarily take? No. But for a lot of people, they can't necessarily do all the base things, or they're not comfortable thinking OPSEC, or they're not, they need some trust in some things somewhere, and they can handle that with a backup of personal responsibility. So it was a good, middle path to take for people that need options. Like if are you going to go tell grandma to, hey, take self-custody, grandma? Maybe, but she probably needs a little help, even though she may know how that she's going to practice with a key. And, but anyway, multi-sig. I thought it went really great. I think people liked it. I got some good positive response for the whole deal afterwards. You put a good video on your account about it, put it out there, quick little thing that we were doing stuff. I love, and I'll just add to that, I love the promotion, the steady feed of clear signal content that Abundant Minds and y'all put out there regularly in a multifaceted, various platforms, clips and the podcast, Beau. Great. Well, the blog, your writing, Sydney, prolific writing and well thought out when you approach these issues, looking at the big picture stuff. Thinking back now to the conference. So the morning.
I love that something you just said. Yeah. I think it was a great point about the. So I'll tell you a story. I remember before I worked at Abundant Minds, I had my own consulting practice where I almost entirely just help people with their custody setup. I walk into their homes, teach them about Bitcoin, and say, very sincerely, I would like to help you set up a wallet. Obviously, I don't want to see your seed phrase or anything, but I'm going to bring a seed hammer, which is a product made by the Seed Center kind of group, and it was a piece of metal and engrave it for them so they don't have to sit there with a hammer and chisel kind of thing. And I would help them set up their signing device and do the whole thing for them. And I really felt it was, obviously doing all that stuff right is very, very important, but it can be very daunting. So I thought I'd make a very nice service for someone and help them do that. And I always remember one time I go to this gentleman's house, I go over with the seed hammer, I make him a seed phrase, throw on a cloth, put it in a bag, never show this to anyone, including myself, keep it in your house all the time. Here's your device. I set up the signing device with him, connected it to Sparrow and all that kind of stuff. And he comes back to me maybe 2 weeks. We would meet at this business networking group, and he has the signing device in hand, and he goes, Sydney, I was really hoping I could get you a reminder. How do I view my balance? And he takes out the device in front of everyone. I go, how do I view my balance? And I go,
this is your private key.
yeah. It's like, God, that you don't have to bring that outside. Please bring that home. Don't show that to anyone. Like, you don't need to take that outside.
Where did this go? Have you been traveling with this thing?
Well, right. And you sort of, it was a really humbling experience for me that, I can walk into someone's house. I could do everything correct with them. I could give them all the rundown of the risks and all that kind of stuff. And, what is this and what is this and how does this fit with this? And here's how you think about the risk profiles of each of these things. But it can be too much to chew for someone. And therefore it's not about just only thinking about it in terms of, well, what would I do? What is the most hardcore Bitcoin thing to do? There's a lot of it that is involved of, you really do have to meet with people and you don't want to give them too much so that they mess up. That's what made me think about it when you said that. You don't want to give them too much so they get daunted or angry or lose their money or anything like that. It's a slow journey and it's our job to sort of walk them through that, and then in the correct steady pace that isn't necessarily our proclivity, but is what's right for them.
Yeah,
you probably learned a lot about. Go ahead. Yeah,
I was gonna say that's the danger that we all face as Bitcoiners, right? We've grasped something profound and multifaceted that most of the world doesn't understand, that we're all very passionate about. And I think if you're on the Bitcoin journey, at some point you probably become an educator for someone else. And I mean, if Bitcoin is hard to understand, mining has got so many other pitfalls that come along with it for taking people on the learning journey. It's part of why Sydney is so incredible, is he can feel out where people are and understand who's ready for what, right? Because we're all walking around this galaxy brain that's ready to just fire hose unleash on anybody who seems mildly receptive to it. And Bitcoin? The real skill, the real skill is knowing sequencing, knowing that every person has an individual curriculum that's probably right for them, with the right pace of dripping out the most appropriate thing to get them wins, but not overwhelm them, right? The most profound things that we ever learn, sometimes we shy away from because we don't have a sense of progress and momentum early enough in the journey. And I think that's a lot of what Sydney spends time doing, is figuring out, how can I get this person a win that gets them closer and closer to ideal state, but doesn't demotivate them with just the fire hose of information that I could throw at them, and absolutely ruin any sense of making progress or experiencing that. Like, momentum is addictive. You learn something and you apply it, and it provides value in your life. You want more. But if you put on too much weight too early, it feels like an uphill slog, and you wonder if it's ever going to be worth it. So I spend a lot of time thinking, I know Sydney does as well, what's the appropriate pace to take each individual through to not demotivate them, to make sure that they experience that sense that we all had at some point of, oh my God, I need to go faster. I'm
late.
ready for more.
We're all late.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, people feel late, or when they FOMO in, or they're just curious, and you get excited on their behalf and start going. It's hard to, and you both have certainly learned this through experience, and Sydney with your consulting, is that slowing down a little bit, or say you're training somebody who's excited, and then how do you train on time preference, say, or like, I've orange pilled people, and then they're all about number go up or doing all the things, and I'm like, whoa, let's just like make sure we're not going nuts here, or they get on board and then number go down, and they're just like, ah. But anyway, training on the big picture, and then also like an analogy being like, okay, not getting people over their skis, where grandma notices that the neighborhood's getting a little more dangerous, and you're like, okay, here's a gun, grandma. It's like, no, let's step by step this, and look, what does grandma need? What is my good friend who's smart, but some people just don't necessarily want, or can't handle aspects of OPSEC, or the responsibility, maybe all the self-custody, maybe at first, now and eventually perhaps, but where are they at? What do they need? And that's what Abundant Minds does for mining as well, and in your education. So getting to the morning talk that you had, Beau, is a funny title. Everything you were too afraid to ask about Bitcoin mining. How did that go, and what was some takeaways you had there?
Well, I personally had a really fun time, mostly because I just enjoyed highlighting the other people on the team. Sydney being one of them. We also had Joe, our COO, and Todd, our site ops lead. One of the greatest things that I get to experience is seeing the other people on our team shine and be who they are, and people fall in love with that, because I love them so much, and I treat our team really like family in some sense, in the most appropriate way in a corporate culture. But the whole point of that talk, that panel, was to give people permission to understand that there's a lot of unknowns in this industry, and there's no such thing as stupid questions. I probably hear the phrase more often than anything else, hey, I'm going to ask you a stupid question. And I do my best to remind people, if not every time, most times, that there are no stupid questions in a bleeding edge pioneering industry that's reshaping the foundations of how we all cooperate and interact as people. There's just questions. There's so much to unpack with this. And I consider myself reasonably smart, like humbly, I have an engineering degree. I've built businesses. I'm a pretty decent investor. And my first experience in mining was a nightmare. And I did so many things wrong, and really didn't have much of an excuse. I mean, I'd been in the Bitcoin space for half a decade at that point, had plenty of other informative experiences that should have led me to be successful almost immediately, and I wasn't. And part of it was I was afraid to ask for help, and kind of thought I could just do it on my own and make my own decisions. And apart from providing great service to people and giving them a means to get into mining with people they can trust and a service that's dependable, one of my greatest passions is helping investors be better investors and unpack the things that they don't understand, so that they don't repeat the experience that I had. In many ways, the most purposeful things that we can do for other people is help them avoid or better navigate some of the experiences that we've had ourselves. So
Mhm.
that talk, my opening is just letting people know it's okay not to know. And going on the journey of knowing and understanding is in itself a huge reward. And I believe that our team are some of the best shepherds you could possibly ask for on that journey. And we just wanted to give a small taste of that in 45 minutes or so.
That's awesome. Isn't it so nice to have a great team of smart people that uh, are there for all the right reasons and are good for it? Putting up on screen here, it's kind of small, but uh, little clips of you up on stage, the team up there up on stage talking about it. Um, I uh, I love everything that your team does, and I do think that you were kind of forged in the fire, if you will. I might say that back in some years ago when you were making a transition, getting into Bitcoin, and early on, getting sorely burned and wrecked. I mean, there are scammers out there. There are mining companies, mining offerings that aren't doing good business, say, or are might allure you for certain reasons, but then you get into it and there's hidden fees, hidden costs, hidden whatevers, or downright just you don't have what you think you have or what you're paying for or whatnot. You learned from that hard and strongly and came out of that like, okay, values, principles, the ethics of it, being transparent, providing the education. What I love about Abundant Minds is that you're doing that and you knowing from experience, making that clear. And what are some things that people are afraid to ask about mining? What are stupid questions or things that people think they want to know and need to know?
Well, I'll let Sydney chime in a minute, but I think the biggest barrier is people don't even know what they don't know. I
Right.
mean, if you think about Bitcoin as an analog, people don't even know that they're making a mistake with their custody. They don't even know that they're thinking in the wrong terms of this asset. And so there's a lot of similar things we have to unpack with mining. I'd say the biggest for people who are already kind of curious and looking to get into it, the biggest mistake I see the most often is an over reliance on a spreadsheet, especially for the people. I mean, being numerate and being good with numbers is a gift, and being too reliant on those numbers at the expense of physical reality, which is what we deal with in mining, is not just the digital world, but the physical world of operating a mining operation really doesn't get taken into account as much as it should when you're just looking at income and expenses on a spreadsheet. And so a lot of what we do is unpack everything surrounding that spreadsheet that isn't being taken into account and helping people understand the operational realities, the trade-offs that you make when you choose, some lower cost alternative. Maybe it's another host, maybe it's just another deal that you're looking at, versus something that on spreadsheets may appear to be slightly less attractive, but is taking into account and protecting against far more than exists. And without going through our 16 differentiators or whatever you might want to call those, not
All the
taking into
questions,
account
yeah.
the little things is the biggest deal, whether it's your uptime, your insurance practices, the way that you handle repairs, the climate. I mean, the climate's a huge deal that people rarely take into account. Ultimately, if you come into this industry and you think, well, I just got to get the lowest cost per kilowatt hour energy rate and everything else is secondary, is honestly what led to my very expensive mistake. And it's not even a case of, there are for sure malicious actors out there, there are scammers out there, but even well-meaning people that don't have the right skill set and don't have the right incentives can lead to you having a really raw experience that you weren't hoping to have. And
Mm.
I throw no shade on anybody trying to make a legitimate mining business work in this industry, because it is hard. There's a lot to deal with, but because there are so many ways that you can get it wrong or set a customer up for failure, you can mean very well, and just because you didn't show up with the right skill and experience and tools, cause someone to have a bad experience with mining, which might sour their whole view on the industry itself. And that's really what we want to guard against, is like you guys were talking about with custody, giving people excessive amounts of responsibility before they're ready to handle it can lead them to turn fully away from the path.
Right. They have one bad experience, and they're like, and then in their head they just flip a switch. Well, I tried that. I will never do that. Yeah. Sydney, thoughts?
Yeah. To add to that, I would say one of the biggest questions I see is people asking the whether they should buy Bitcoin or mine Bitcoin, and which one should they do, and why is one better than the other. And there's all kind of ways to answer that question. This maybe the easy off the bat type 4 things. One is mining Bitcoin, you get it at production cost. 2, if you structure it correctly, and a lot of our clients do this, they'll do it for like tax advantages and write off, use bonus depreciation to reduce their taxable income. There's also the non-KYC aspect of mining Bitcoin. And then 4th, which I actually think is one of the more interesting things to think about, is that it's really a more ethical way of acquiring Bitcoin. And I think that, as you alluded to, in the past, Bitcoin mining hosting has largely been a very sketchy and not so good type business. And I, for the whole entire experience I've been in the Bitcoin mining, in Bitcoin, I've always known Bitcoin mining hosting to be something that's just out of reach or just not good to do. So either you had to mine Bitcoin yourself, either do it in your home, which rarely can people do, or you have to literally create an entire business and learn all the skills so you can go make a facility somewhere with cheap electricity available. The whole hosting thing is just not really an option.
Right.
I think within the culture itself, there's only one real way of acquiring Bitcoin. It's always going through an exchange, buying it, and getting KYC and all of that. And I sometimes wonder if that has honestly created you were mentioning earlier when you're talking to people and you're trying to orange pill them, and you could still sort of notice that they have this fiat number go up mindset. They buy the thing because they want the number to go up, and they see the number go down, and they go, "Oh, actually, that was I don't know why you told me to do this. This is weird." And
right,
because I think when you get into Bitcoin that way, when you go on some website, you buy it for whatever amount of money, and you put it in your cold storage, and everyone on the wavelengths are saying, never sell your Bitcoin, hodl till you die, just keep this as like a reserve asset on your personal balance sheet, just like digital gold, and you just keep this. And when you see the numbers go up, it's entirely how you base the validity of that decision off of. Is that number because you were told it's just some store of value? And personally, I also think that the Bitcoin world needs to evolve from that mentality. Bitcoin doesn't survive if we all just hodl and then use banks and credit cards all the time through our daily life. If one day, there's a reason why we call it the block subsidy, the newly minted Bitcoin that everyone gets it's a subsidy because what actually keeps Bitcoin alive is us moving around Bitcoin on chain. That it is the blood flow of this organism. And one day the subsidy is going to be gone. And if at that time everyone's still hodling the Bitcoin and using bank accounts, Bitcoin will stop working. And so there's there's a feeling you have perhaps when you get involved in mining, because mining is the most original raw form of getting Bitcoin. The very beginning, the people who we all think are the most lucky people in the world because they got into Bitcoin so early, all they did was mine Bitcoin, and they were interacting with Bitcoin at the most raw rudimentary level. And I think it's not only is that healthier for the network, say if every single person that makes a Coinbase account or whatever choose to buy mining instead and help decentralize the network with pools and all that kind of stuff, it would make Bitcoin far, 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 far healthier and resolve a lot of problems that I think all of us are having arguments about. But also I think it would give everyone such a more deeper, intimate understanding about Bitcoin, and they would interact with it more to promote a more, Bitcoin-minded lens of how to view this rather than a fiat-minded lens. And so I think, again, one of the reasons why I'm so just overjoyed to be doing what I'm doing every day is that Beau had the foresight to build a company that really solved a problem that the industry had, which is there was no real way for the common person to mine Bitcoin better. And if more people mined that Bitcoin, the network would get much healthier. And I think it would help with the way at which we all truly understand what we're all getting involved in, and get out of this fiat KYC hold until you die type mindset.
Totally. Yeah. Now I'll bring up Abundant Minds website here because on here under Learn, and you got blogs, and so Sydney, you've written articles about these concepts, everything from nodes and BIP 110 and Bitcoin as money. Ultimately, what I'd just say there is that you're looking at it from the broadest picture, in my opinion, a big picture, like what is good for Bitcoin, what is good for people, how does this succeed and survive? Of course, we say, well, decentralized and secure. Okay, what does that mean? We wouldn't be having these necessarily node arguments if there were 100,000 nodes or a million nodes. And you're both quite aware of, legitimate concerns about mining centralization, like who's mining it and where, and are they sharing all their pools or in cahoots and all the things. Abundant Minds is providing that decentralization and encourages it. And so, because you can pick your own pool, right? You can point to your node, you can pick your pool. And hey, the bigger that Abundant Minds grows, the more contribution that you're giving to the decentralization effect. On the money part of it as well, it's like, okay, people are looking at the subsidy, the block reward, all that. Okay, over time, let's play that out. What helps Bitcoin? It's Bitcoin being used. And so people get into it, and then they get into a habit of like, oh, I just stack and spend, and I never want to let go of this. I would never buy pizza with it. I stack. It's like, okay, hey, once you kind of come to terms with that concept and you're grappling with how fiat are you? It's like, okay, spend and replace or get more into Bitcoin, wherever you can land. Spend and replace, but use that Bitcoin. Those fees are good. Let those miners work on quality blocks. Get the transactions in there and make it cultural. Get businesses connected. Get it all circular economy going, because we wouldn't be as concerned about all this stuff if the market for the block space worked well to make it work as it can be used for. So Bitcoin, even as it can function as a money, it is also just simply a property, an immutable property. But the function of money itself is really important to help, one, people use it in, I think as we have this great realignment in our fiat struggle for relevancy and debt, hopefully we can make more of a soft landing there, or at least fertile ground, so that when fiat just stops working for people, there's a nice green pasture for everyone just to transition to, without it being like, oh, that's kind of awkward or hard. I think the tools are coming together, but I love the messaging that you give, is that even as you're growing, you've got like 7 sites now in the state, right? In Oregon?
Mm-hmm.
And growing.
7 right now.
So let's say Abundant Mind grows and grows and grows, and it's like, oh, you're a big player. It's actually contributing to the decentralized nature of the mining, right? Because we've got, there's Stratum V2 now, which adds some options. Sydney and I were talking a bit about this as I'm still learning about like what a template is and all this stuff. There's also Datum. So Ocean, Datum, you encourage Ocean and Datum. I've got these little miners here that I started with just as I learned and for fun. And I'm like, okay, so how do I point it to Ocean? What is a template? and where do I point it to? And how do I get this? How do I get these sats actually, like they're accumulating? How do I get those? And anyway, not to get into the rabbit hole of a potential miner's process and where you might conclude that, oh, if I'm going to be serious about this, maybe I just give Abundant Minds a call. Because if you're really into that, you might just say you're really into mining and contributing, and you're like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to just give some big mining company money. It's actually a different concept than that. I mean, yes, there's an investment amount to make it worth something, which, are these going to really pay off? I mean, maybe if you like lotto mining for fun and the spirit of it, cool. I mean, there's a spirit to having skin in the game and mining. But for a lot of people, they go from this cool spirit of, yeah, I want to mine, to, ooh, maybe this is worth something. Maybe it's business cost benefit, something to think about. Well, maybe you don't do that at home then. And maybe you call Abundant Minds. Beau, tell us, or both of you, tell me about how making that shift from learning about mining, wanting to get into mining, thinking, oh, I could buy an ant miner, oh, maybe two, oh, maybe three. Next thing you know, you're at home, you're looking at your electrical bill or keeping them cool or depreciation, and it's a hobby. There's a real line between hobby mining and then, say, a business and all the incentives around that. There's a list of them. For those that are new to this, like I have been and am, tell us about all the good incentives of signing in with Abundant Minds and having your machine taken care of by an expert team.
Well, I think you're hitting on something that is core to what we're all trying to do, which is Bitcoin is this radically self-sovereign technology. And in an ideal world, every participant is radically self-sovereign. And that's a hard leap for most people to make. There's still 99% of the world that we have yet to truly onboard to this technology. And so the goal for us and other companies that are doing great things is to build the best bridge that we can to increase that self-sovereignty in a way that people are likely to adopt. Square being a great example of a company that just onboarded or at least created a bridge to onboard millions of merchants, right? And you can shout from the rooftops all day long, we need more merchants, we need more merchants. But unless somebody builds the bridge, there's not enough room for people to walk unless they have that radical self-sovereignty mindset. And for many people, that only comes incrementally and through experience and with help. So we're here to help with that and make people successful in the easiest way possible, right? Sydney wants people, when they start working with us, to become more sovereign every day that they're working with us. We also recognize that sometimes walking over the bridge requires somebody to hold your hand with you the first time, and maybe even in subsequent times if you're crossing a more difficult river. So when we're bringing people into the mining world, I guess the short way of saying this is that I think mining is an extremely fruitful gift to business owners, people with income liabilities, people navigating the current landscape of operating a business and being able to run a business essentially on a Bitcoin standard or a partial Bitcoin standard, right? There's all of these benefits to going into self-custody in terms of sovereignty. But when you think about mining, it really is the carrot for people who otherwise are not maybe as interested in Bitcoin to understand, oh, there's a income generating asset that I can buy that, depreciates 100% in year one. So you mean to tell me that I can get into this space with a vehicle that allows me to earn income while I'm asleep, store it in the hardest money in the world? It's pretty much all managed for me, and I can participate and learn at my leisure. Okay, I'll take a flyer on that. And
Right.
it's this beautiful vehicle to take the things that humans want. And I've had to learn quite a bit about marketing and psychology over the last few years, because marketing and quote selling Bitcoin is its own challenge for people that don't know the problems that they face.
Right.
Mining is a beautiful features and benefits sheet that if it didn't say Bitcoin mining on it, every business owner in the world would say, sign me up. I want that tomorrow. How quickly can I get started? But for most people, the immediate reaction is, oh, Bitcoin mining sounds hard, sounds technical, sounds scary, sounds scammy. And so our mission, our goal, and the whole way that our service is designed is to help make that bridge wider and easier for people to navigate, and to have a wonderful person like Sydney who can hold your hand however long you need across that bridge while you're getting all of these features and benefits.
Totally. Yeah, and the Clarity Act is pending, perhaps incoming. We'll see how they dinker with details. And if that were to pass, that provides some benefit to miners and the business in a way where it could be, okay, Bitcoin is a commodity, regulated more by the CFTC with a lighter touch, perhaps. That'll probably help, I presume. I don't know all the details about it, but do you see things just getting better from where it is even now?
We just have so much clarity than we did a few years ago. When I first started this, when we were building our first site, we were still under the Biden administration. There were calls, um, from multiple people and prevailing sentiment that kind of at any moment this industry could be wiped from the face of America.
Right.
And that was not an uncommon belief, and especially in a blue state, you're kind of playing with fate a little bit to say that this industry would be around. And within just the last couple of years, that has changed to the point of, oh, now the president's sons are mining Bitcoin, and there's people within the administration. I mean, if you just look across the whole spectrum of people who are involved, are, even if we don't fully agree with their stances on some other things, by and large, Bitcoiners to some degree, or at least own the asset. So we live in a very different environment than we did a couple of years ago. And every piece of regulation that comes down the path is just adding more clarity and certainty for people that are sitting on the sidelines. So while nothing has changed overtly for our industry, I will say there's been a lot of extra clarity. One example being, the SEC formally released a statement that mining isn't a security. Hosted mining is not a securities transaction. So we don't have to work with only accredited investors who want to get into mining, because that creates an artificial filter for people who want to do it, but haven't gone through the accreditation process. So that clarity alone is very helpful, even though most businesses have been kind of operating as if that was the case. There's always this nagging sense that, one day the other shoe is going to drop, and this is going to be classified in a way that harms me or harms my ability to get into the industry. And so every incremental piece that we get of new clarity that makes people feel safer, that in the analogy, makes the bridge feel more stable, is a benefit to the industry and allows more people to feel comfortable taking their first step.
Yeah. Now, Oregon, compared to, like, we think of, say, Texas or Wyoming, they have, this special legislative attention that's pro crypto, perhaps, or Bitcoin for sure. I guess if the federal government lays out a good framework for this is how we look and treat this stuff, is there any risk to Oregon itself, Oregon being special, living here, progressive as in not progressive on things like Bitcoin? Are there risks to Oregon that you ever think about, or is it pretty much no, with the federal government, the SEC, and the approach to it, that all of this is very well defined and the state's not going to step in and do something special?
Every state has the ability to make their own choices. And what keeps me positive about Oregon is that we've only experienced support anywhere that we've gone. Every time it's an education process. I don't want to minimize the fact that there's still a lack of understanding among many policymakers. But when it comes to local engagement and engagement at the state policy level, there's nothing that makes me concerned about operating in Oregon at this point. And truthfully, this is another misconception that many people have, is that mining has to adhere to some extra set of regulation. We've got to get special licenses, that it's more challenging to navigate. The reality is this is just a standard industrial business. And unless there's a specific carve out where you're setting up that requires additional compliance or different design standards, we essentially are just adhering to electrical codes and industrial noise requirements. And outside of that, there's nothing really that, it's not necessarily an easy business to set up in general and get right, but there's nothing excessively complicated when it comes to compliance outside of just you're building a heavy industrial structure, and there's things to think about with that. But Oregon's been a hub for data centers for a long time. Oregon and Washington, we've got tons of renewable energy. We've got a great climate. There are lots of incentive programs available to data centers setting up. And so we kind of ride on the coattails of the existing paths that have been carved for some of those more traditional data center businesses that have chosen to set up in this region.
Yeah, and I live up the Columbia Gorge here, so I'm familiar with the hydro, the renewable energy. There are tons of windmills out east. They're building massive solar farms. all of these renewable energies are just growing, well separate in a way from Bitcoin. It's just the sheer community and social need for energy, all the things coming. Bitcoin's in a way, is riding that tide of understood demand. Like I think Natalie Brunell mentioned it, where AI is sort of like cleared a path for the wasted energy idea of like, well, everybody relates and understands things about AI in a way. So all this infrastructure, there's incentives to build it. The local, like say, whether it's Google, Amazon, Facebook, whatever, they're building all these data centers up and down the rivers and south and all this stuff. Huge, a lot of money, a lot of workforce, a lot of growth and development, economies. Local economies are providing incentives, or like they're willing to have it, with benefits to the community. They'll have their needs, their ground rules. They're not just open doors here, but they're very open to business and economics. So I'm always cynical of government in a way where when there's money involved, the extractive state wants to kind of vulture around that and look at like, where can we sift a little bit, or what can we tax? What can we, whatever. But it's just growing gangbusters, and Abundant Minds is right there. So some of the benefits to being in Oregon and what you're doing, a lot of the sites tapped right into that renewable energy. And like you mentioned, the climate is compared to, is that largely what might set you apart and keep you successful compared to other mining companies that I'll hear about, that I think they have access to cheap energy, but other mining companies have struggled or have made pivots to AI, or kind of, have to sell their Bitcoin for fiat, stay solvent, all the things. With the climate and the renewable energy and your model generally, it's allowed you to keep ASICs running for longer, keep them highly quality maintained. What else? Is it giving you a better footing to grow and stay strong compared to others that have struggled?
I would say you hit on two of the major things that set us apart. Is I don't know anybody else that's really optimizing for this area of the country. They've kind of gone to where the low-hanging fruit is, and we have a lot of benefits up here that keep this business stable, even in an environment where you might have, fuel prices on a run upward, because most of our energy is coming from the hydropower network, from renewable sources. The fuel cost indexing in electrical rates is not something that we have to worry about up here, which keeps us very stable in periods like this. Previously, the fuel inputs around 2021 and 22 changing was a big reason why I had a rough experience in Georgia, because they were very heavily influenced by what the natural gas prices were in that period. So being up here, having that insulation is very helpful. But there's also things that there's fixed rates, and there's things that we choose to do that are not necessarily structural because of the environment, but that are our way of protecting people from the unknowns. The two big ones would be insurance on the value of people's equipment. So you typically, if you're going to be able to get insurance at all on the value of your miners, you're going to pay extra for that. Sometimes a very punitive amount. We just include that as part of the service on everybody's equipment. And then insurance on your hash rate. We have this program called Hash Rate Redirect, where if, say, we have a critical outage or your machine is down, it's got to go to warranty repair, we're actually subbing in our own hash rate to compensate for that, so that if you're expecting to be online 95% of the time, as is in your service level agreement with us, then you're actually going to be online for 95% of the time, historically 98 plus, because we have the hash rate to back it up. There's no bill credits getting issued. There's no, oops, sorry, your machine's down for 3 months. Like, you don't have to pay us for hosting. We know that people come into this to get Bitcoin, and depending on how much Bitcoin you produce has a huge amount of bearing on what your total returns are over the course of the life cycle of the investment. And so in those little ways, which really end up being big ways when you add them all together, we're just protecting all of the blind spots that people typically have when they get into this business. And that ethos goes throughout the whole service structure. I mean, the fact that someone can get on a call with Sydney, just because they have a question about self-custody and not have to, pay a several $100 an hour hourly rate to get high quality advice is part of us making sure that everything that you could possibly need throughout the life of an engagement with us is provided without you getting slammed with a unforeseen extra line item. And that was my experience, and that's what I wanted to protect people from, was having a huge outlay of capital into an industry you may not understand, thinking that everything's going to work out with the amount of budget that you put toward it, and then finding out a few months later, oh, hey, surprise, we need to charge you $150 an hour to diagnose your entire fleet and do some maintenance on it. That'll be $30,000. We don't do that to people. And I think that's part of what sets us apart, is from day one, we're aligned with you being successful, and all of our incentives point that way.
Yeah. Brings to mind a lot of Bitcoiners I meet and talk to. Some of the most base, smart Bitcoiners I meet have that deep ethic of sovereignty, core, like individual sovereignty. Like, I do my thing. I'm a man alone in my own citadel. And so you start to approach mining that way. And because I'll talk to people and they're looking at the counterparty risk, getting entangled. Who am I trusting here? Am I trusting Beau and Sydney? The thing is, though, you go down the mining trail, the cost effectiveness of what you're trying to do just doesn't add up for a lot of people. And yet, like I mentioned, so say you contribute your hash to an operation that's doing it right. Now, are you trusting the entity? Yeah, but that's where your reputation and history comes in, and everything you're saying about it. No tricks, no hidden anything, and uptime contributing the hash. And a good proven track record. So let's say getting to my point that in what Sydney mentioned, mining Bitcoin is better than buying it, even more ethical perhaps. Handful of incentives that I have that I thought of here and wrote down. So there are tax advantages. So trying to do that yourself as a hobbyist and navigate whatever IRS rules, governance rules, things about it, even as you grow or you're big, trying to navigate rules around it can be tricky, or not good if it's just a hobby versus a business. So let's say you try to be a business about it. Well, taking advantage of all that stuff, you could spend so much time and energy and effort, or mess it up, trying to navigate the details, the intricacies of taxation stuff, the equipment depreciation, what energy you're using, how is it renewable, yada yada yada. You can get mined Bitcoin at wholesale prices, so you can get your Bitcoin with the deductions cheaper than the spot price, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so how does that work? Tell me about that.
Sure. So the way I like to put this in perspective is Bitcoin is the invention of the first digital and really only digital commodity. And just like any other commodity, there's a production cost to that commodity. If I'm a corn farmer, I have a certain amount of cost I have to put into the soil to grow my corn, and then I go to the market and I sell that corn for some kind of profit. And how much profit I can sell for the corn kind of has to do with the supply of other farmers out there and the demand of people wanting to buy my corn. And Bitcoin's the same way. So there's a production cost for Bitcoin, and then miners sell that Bitcoin, or sometimes they hold it, but they sell it to the market, and that's what determines, in a way, the market price for the Bitcoin. And so I think a production cost is not a static thing. Again, any farmer is going to have a different cost for their crop, and that's not just their electricity fees. I think it's easy for us to think that is, but it's not. It's how are they maintaining their machines, and therefore how much they have to pay for
overtime.
How are they paying for their employees? It's all the overhead of the whole entire operation. And if you thought of that, and you just sort of you can try to extrapolate what the average would be across the planet, you can start to have an understanding of what is the cost of producing Bitcoin. And for our clients, though it changes every 2 weeks because of the difficulty adjustments, I don't have the exact number in my head, imagine around 60,000. So when you buy a machine today with today's difficulty, you're really dollar cost averaging in a Bitcoin at $60,000 a coin. Bitcoin skyrockets to 150 tomorrow, you're still just getting it at $60,000.
Right.
So what you're really doing with Bitcoin mining is you're locking in that price to purchase Bitcoin at a lower cost far into the future because you expect the price to go up. Analogy I like to use, imagine we all go to the store and we like to buy milk off the shelf. And, I'm sitting here and I know that milk is the most precious liquid of all time. And one day it's going to become the money and everyone's going to realize that. And so there's going to be a day where milk is just flying off the shelf because everyone realizes that fiat is going to zero and they're going to want Bitcoin instead or the milk. And so what I'm going to do before that time, because I don't want to pay those exorbitant prices and perhaps run out of milk on the shelf. I want to keep having milk. I'm going to buy a cow. I'm going to put some money up front to buy that cow now. I'm going to milk that cow for cheap. And, maybe at the moment I was able to get the cow for cheap because, man, the production cost for the milk is going to be similar to what I could have paid at the store. But when that day comes, when milk starts flying off the shelf and it gets very, very exorbitantly expensive, I'm sitting there happy as a clam because I have that cow and I'm still able to milk it for that same production cost. And that's really what Bitcoin mining allows someone to do. In a way, it's almost it's the true way of diversifying your portfolio in a way in which you accumulate your Bitcoin. You buy it and you mine it, and mining it you're doing because you're preparing yourself for the phases of the bull market when everyone's paying all this money for Bitcoin and you're able to get that cheaper cost.
And not everyone has to get their own cow. There's a farmer next door that knows how to take care of cows. And so instead of you having to get up in the morning and do the milking, feeding them, watering them, how's the grass, all the things. But you might, provide the farmer with some, make a deal with the farmer who the dairy farmer who has the cows and does that for you. And you still get the milk, but you're getting that milk at a 30% to 50% discount compared to market spot price. It amplifies your upside of the underlying asset. And so as in time preference wise, if you're thinking a few years, 4 years, what have you, as Bitcoin, if you believe in Bitcoin and Bitcoin goes up too, that is just amplified. Like you said, you're buying in early here with Abundant Minds, who is doing it right, taking care of things for you and stuff. And then you're DCAing in a way all the way. And you're not just trading your fiat bucks for KYC Bitcoin off an exchange and then having to move it, whatever, mining it. Now it's non-KYC then it would be. Mm-hmm. So non-KYC that goes to your wallet, right? Mm-hmm. So all those benefits. So the sovereignty mentality, there was Brandon Gentile was on your podcast recently and talking about, like you mentioned, Beau, the idealist Bitcoiner who's tip of the spear, wants to push and promote and be the change and all the good things like I am and we are. But there's a difference between what he mentioned as being an idealist and taking on maybe more risk or effort and time and energy than you need to versus being a pragmatist where all the ethics and the values are there, but you can still contribute. Like you said, be the bridge, be the incremental change, contribute as well as you ever really could, even better. And instead of, like your analogy, Beau, is don't be a tugboat, be the lighthouse. So sometimes a sovereign Bitcoiner feels like they got to push and take it on and do it all and learn all the things and then do all the things. And I get it. And I mean, we still do in a way. We're always learning. But you can, when it comes to mining, get in on a good quality source of Bitcoin. Grow your stack, but don't take on all the things that you could devote a career to. So basically, call Abundant Minds.
Well, I think that no matter what you're doing, there's trade-offs, right? And I think this is important to highlight, is that you can learn so much from setting up a miner in your garage or having a BitAxe running or, going and developing a facility. But when people think of doing that, they're often thinking, well, I could probably do it cheaper if I do it myself. And what usually ends up happening, I don't want to say every case, but 9 out of 10 times when people say, I'm thinking about doing this myself, If you add in everything, including their time, the CapEx, all that it takes to set up a facility, not to mention, can you find energy that's actually cheaper than what we're procuring?
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's not actually better. Now, I highly encourage people to do it purely for the learning experience because I want people to get their own raw understanding of how all this works, and I think that's valuable. But when it comes to scaling a business, oftentimes the people who have built the infrastructure, put in the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of hours, built the team, set up all the infrastructure can actually get you a better deal than what you could get yourself because of all the work and time and effort that we spend setting this up, not just for clients, but for ourselves. I mean, at the end of the day, we are also mining Bitcoin and we also have economics to think about. And so we're setting up these deals not just so that we can sell them to our end clients, but also because we are optimizing to be the best miners that we can be ourselves and just making that service available. And the back end of that is, a lot of people have a thought that, well, there's all these huge public companies out there, and I've seen that some of their power agreements are like 2-cent power or whatever. How can I possibly be competitive with a public miner? And that goes into, you may not have looked all the way down the 8K or the quarterly filing to see that there's a lot of extra overhead that goes into those businesses. And if you were to actually amortize the, $40 million CEO salaries and all the share dilution and everything that goes into running those businesses, they're producing a Bitcoin for, in some cases, 20 or 30% more than the people who are mining with us. And you don't get exposure if you're just owning a public equity to the depreciation benefits from owning the equipment. None of that Bitcoin is actually going to your wallet. So again, you could be completely self-sovereign and set all this up yourself. But I'm the kind of 80-20 mindset of how do I get almost everything that I'm wanting for, a fifth of the effort and set up in probably a better, easier way than I could myself. And to me, hosted mining is that vehicle. It solves so many pain points of wanting to be a miner, but not feeling like you could do everything yourself and not taking the trade-off of having, I would say, next to zero sovereignty when it comes to owning the equities in some of these larger companies.
Yeah, and with your transparency on it too, I should mention, I mean, I know it now, but initially some people might not be aware that you put in some money up front for a miner, you're getting the actual hardware, like down to the serial number of the machine, a dashboard to access and see exactly what is going on and what's going on. And then, 0% repair bills, 95 to 98 more percent uptime. And then 100% Bitcoin being kept by the customer. So there's all these reasons to do it. Now, not being any financial or tax advice. So you consult with a financial advisor. I guess it goes without saying. I should say that because if we get into things about taxation and stuff, if someone calls and signs up with Abundant Mines and starts mining and all that, can they also then take advantage of creating a sole proprietorship or an S corp? Even as they're hashing with Abundant Mines, they own the hardware. And then they can treat that, they can write off costs, they can get tax benefits from that. Do you want to break down those potentials for people that, okay, the machine is in your rig and your setup and your folks are taking care of it and all that, but a person can still treat their taxes or that DCA Bitcoin as they prefer, like a business write-off, correct?
When you're setting up a mining operation with us, you are truly starting a business. So this is an active operating business that you're the owner for, and you can think of Abundant Mines as just like your property manager, if you will. So you're depending on outside contractors and services to help you run your business, but ultimately this is a business that you are forming. And to start that business, there's a capital investment. You're buying the miners, right? Inside of a business structure with the big beautiful bill, you can depreciate 100% of the cost of those miners in year one. You also have income for that business, right? As you mine Bitcoin, you're producing an income liability, but you also have operating expenses. So when you pay your flat hosting fee, that goes against any income that you earn. And so you truly have an operating business P&L, just like you would in any other industry. The unique part is Bitcoin has its own nuances, and of course, it's a very novel asset in terms of how you treat it as property. So we do work with a CPA that we have, who's very skilled in and very familiar with the implications that come with running a mining business. And this is one of the biggest questions that people have when they get in is, okay, I'm sold on the vehicle. This sounds really cool. Now, how do I do all the back end structure? And most people, even if you've got a great CPA and a great wealth team, are not familiar with this industry at all. And so there's a big education gap usually. So we end up consulting on this, talking with your existing CPAs, of course. Ours is happy to take people on and do those mining specific returns. But we saw this as a gap as well, in that when you are setting up a mining operation or even just putting a meaningful amount of wealth into Bitcoin, the typical services that you need on the back end of a large amount of wealth, the attorneys, the accountants, the wealth managers, the custody solutions, the compliance, everything on the back end is pretty well structured for TradFi. There's, to my knowledge, very few groups that actually help you do the full back end professional services setup. And we don't actually do that ourselves. We're not CPAs at Abundant Minds. But what we did do is set up a family office group of service providers to help with everything that you would expect to have if you were going to put a meaningful portion of your wealth in a new technology that's got different implications, among a team that's coordinated and understands how to set up your strategy and can still be a complement. I mean, many people are going to put, let's say you're worth $100 million and you're going to put 10 to 20 of it into Bitcoin. You still need to have a full team of services, even if it's just on a fractional basis, to manage that position and all the implications with it. So we saw that need, assembled the team. For anybody who's curious about it, that is called the Bitcoin Family Office, and it's at thebitcoinfamilyoffice.com. But that's just because we saw the need for it. Is people require that, especially at higher net worth tiers, require the back end professional services to stay in compliance, to handle the unique challenges of Bitcoin. And we find that that's the biggest gap of people that want to get into mining and aren't exactly sure how to manage all of the additional complexity that comes with setting up the entity, setting up the trust structure, making sure that your taxes are filed correctly, building a strategy. We're very intentional and capable guides here at Abundant Minds, but ultimately you want some letters behind the name if you're going to put a meaningful position into this industry.
Yeah, and people that have a sizable amount to get more than just skin in the game, or they're looking at some real benefit to this, they're going to need that kind of advice, I think, as they get into it, or looking at all the caveats. So I just brought up the stage here. You can go to thebitcoinfamilyoffice.com. There's that. And then on your website here, Abundant Minds, you can contact y'all, book a free call. So you get probably a variety of customers that approach you with various plans or various ideas. And then you get to know them and, okay, where does this person fit? How do they start? You're probably looking at a minimum of, I think you've said, about $10,000 if you want to start to get a decent rig going with some reasonable return. But you could scale that up as far as you want to go. And then as it's accumulating or whatever, you have that option. You're making, you're making your Bitcoin, and then you could build up a flywheel effect where you take that Bitcoin, you build bigger, you keep mining more, you build up more Bitcoin, and spin it up as far as you want. However, whatever your Bitcoin strategy is, stacking and holding or spending versus mining more. And then perhaps the sky is the limit in terms of price per hash and whatnot you're getting out of it. But what would you say an average or median customer kind of looks like? Is it people really just trying to start more simply, modestly, or you get some big players as well, I'm sure.
Oh, we can have all kinds. I mean, there are plenty of people that come and just want to get one machine and dip their feet wet and start to learn, and then they just want to play around and they want to learn and just see what it's like. And then we have people who buy many machines. And so you could imagine, just like a Bitcoin exchange, you got people buying teeny tiny amounts of Bitcoin. You could be having people buy what they feel to be a lot of Bitcoin, but to some, millionaire, billionaire is a tiny amount of Bitcoin. Then of course you have the millionaire, billionaires buying a lot of Bitcoin. And so we really have all kinds of clients coming to us, and it's from a customer service type side, it's a delight to serve everyone wherever they're at, because again, it can be a large portion of the net wealth buying those machines. It can be a very small portion, but either way, they're getting into Bitcoin in a far more intimate manner and learning about it in a much more intimate way, and they get the same amount of service regardless if it's one machine or hundreds of machines.
Yeah, and then all the tax advantages. Okay, so you've got the law allows for effectively immediate year one benefits. So the equipment, repairs, internet, electricity, particularly you're advantaged by renewable energy, rental of the space, the cooling costs, etc. But anyway, you can help customers with navigating how they might deduct or treat it as a business, recommending keeping it separate and treating it like a business, not getting it intermixed or whatever, but treating it like carving out a space for the Bitcoin investment, the Bitcoin business, and keeping it clean. And you can basically consult and guide people through those processes. And for the equipment, zero sales tax in Oregon, I might add, right? So
That's right. But yeah, you have it about right. I tend to help people more on the technical side of things. So like you said, it's good to keep it clean, and of course you want to do that with your Bitcoin wallet and stuff like that too. So I help people all the time with helping them set up helping them understand almost the tree of Bitcoin wallets that you can create under one signing device, let's say, so they keep things separate. And so we definitely help people as much as we can, but of course there are those things that we cannot help, and then we gently point them to our CPA.
yeah, let's see. It's Section 179 of the IRS code allows miners to deduct immediate expenses for depreciable equipment, which it is. So you buy it, but immediately you just know it depreciates. So that's helpful.
Yep.
Now let's just say you buy in on some miners and you accumulate some Bitcoin, and then you're like, okay, I want to build this flywheel up. I want to convert that and get more miners. Does capital gains insert itself into that process? Are you selling your Bitcoin to buy the miners, or how does that look? Is it more seamless, or do you need to go through a fiat rail, or what does that look like?
Well, I know Sydney's going to have his own take on this. I like to remind people that mining is a vehicle to acquire Bitcoin, and you are not more successful because you get more miners. You're more successful because you get more Bitcoin. So in every decision that you make, especially one to potentially liquidate Bitcoin to get more miners, you should think, am I ending up with more Bitcoin at the end of this? Just to anchor the mindset. And I say that because it's very natural for us, especially me coming from real estate, to think in terms of I'm getting an asset, a house, it's throwing off cash, and I'm taking that and recycling it into more assets. Well, that's all fine and good when your cash flow is being thrown off in cash. But when you're mining, what's actually happening is you're getting an asset, which is a Bitcoin miner, but it's very different than a house because it's, let's call it a 5 to 6 year duration asset. The long-term asset is actually the cash flow that it's throwing off. So your Bitcoin that it's throwing off is the asset that you want to hold for the long term and is what you're optimizing for, which is a complete reframe from the, real estate is the asset, the cash flow as the fuel to get more assets kind of thinking. So I'll let Sydney opine on that, but I just want to set that up front that in every decision, you should be asking yourself, am I giving up Bitcoin so that I can make more Bitcoin? And sometimes that is true when you're getting into mining, but depending on the way that you're collateralizing it or liquidating it, just like a tax conversation, there's a lot of nuance when you're looking at the reinvestment strategy.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off of that, I agree. You know, I'm someone who is very much doing my best to live entirely on a Bitcoin standard. And what starts to happen in that is that you denominate your wealth in terms of how much Bitcoin. What is the nominal Bitcoin number I have and across all my wallets, let's say. And that's the lens at which we approach things. And so when I look at these things, it's all we currently live in this fiat system where we're subordinate to the banks and we're using their money and all the time and all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to move our energy and our time into this other world, this more sovereign, free system. And so everything is a question of how do you convert the green to the orange? And as we've alluded to almost over and over and over again, the most default way at which people think about that is they convert the green into the orange by walking up to exchange, handing them the green and getting an orange back at whatever spot market price there is. But in many ways and in many scenarios, Bitcoin mining is just a more efficient means of converting the green to the orange. And that's the right mindset to have, is that you're just funneling it through this machine that is going to more imagine all energy conversion systems have some kind of heat loss. You can never have 100% conversion of the green and the orange. I can't grab $100 and turn it immediately to $100 of Bitcoin. There's always going to be the heat loss, whether that be a fee you're paying for the exchange or anything like that, or the sort
tax
of
liability.
Yeah, exactly, right? You got to pay taxes before you can convert in the first place. There's never 100% energy conversion. But Bitcoin mining, because of, again, the way it can play a role in taxes and the way at which you're accumulating at a production cost, it can very much be a much more efficient means of converting as much green energy as you can into the orange energy. And that's the mindset to have. The machine is the means to the end. The entrance into freedom is the real end result.
Yeah, and a lot of people find themselves in a cycle, not to call it a rut, but you're grinding in fiat land to stack your fiat so then you can buy Bitcoin, and you're in that cycle. But if you shift that to mining, you're just more directly connected with the source and the benefits of all that. Beau, you've got a background in real estate, Dallas area and all that, and I've talked to other Bitcoiners that have been or are very involved in real estate. And it's been, 3 or 4 years now, but I remember one of Saylor's amazing rants about comparing Bitcoin to the most granite type of real estate you could ever have. And there could be this big shift from, a legacy process of, okay, what's a good source of, steady income flow for people sitting on assets. And for a lot of boomers and others, it's been real estate. You accumulate real estate, and then we've seen what has gone on in the housing market and the access to housing, who owns the housing versus living in housing. And so as opposed to having all those counterparty risks of a house where it's the land, the maintenance or the structures or tenants or laws and taxes and all those things that bleed off, like the heat effect you mentioned, Sydney. There's a lot of it in real estate, and then acts of God and just who knows what and then you find your time and energy being spent maintaining an endless variety of physical things and that whole business versus. Now, Saylor's point was just get Bitcoin, buy it, and sit on it. Now, of course, he's spin off all those little the money hack games and stuff. But mining, comparably, could it be that Bitcoin mining, not just holding it, but Bitcoin mining could be like the new venture akin to real estate, where, like you said, businesses looking at the numbers and the strategy there would just be like, if it didn't say Bitcoin and you thought of it as like property, you'd say, oh, duh, do that instead of all the stuff hanging off you with real estate. Maybe there could be a big shift for people moving from the real estate landlord game, property managers, whatever you do, into a much more, not to call it simple, but a more straightforward, less counterparty risked asset accumulation and business model. Could you see a shift happening economically, societally, away from legacy type assets into Bitcoin mining.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think that my realization was a unique one. It was very profound for me, and I can only see now with the benefit of hindsight how profound it was and what it led to for me. But it's not a unique insight to realize once you're exposed to a better asset that you're sitting on a slightly worse asset or a way worse asset. And real estate, just to not make people feel bad, is probably the best thing that most people have access to that is it's the least bad thing you could have other than Bitcoin, probably in many people's cases. And so I speak to that audience with just absolute love and care for you having something that's worked very well compared to almost everything else for many years, but try to impart the understanding that there's not much to go from where we are in terms of that whole asset class accumulating more value. And if anything, there's a much better case to be made for it losing value relative to other things, partially because it's gained its own monetary premium. Estimates are anywhere from 50 to 100 trillion of the 300 trillion currently in real estate is just monetary premium from people having no better vehicles that they could possibly save their wealth in until now, right? And
Yeah.
it's a gradually then suddenly process of the smartest capital in the world realizing, oh, there's a better vehicle than what I've been using for this purpose. And in many ways, mining is the most natural transition for that type of capital because it is physical, because it does map to the reality that you've been acculturated to if you've been a landlord before in your life. And so all I want to do, as we've talked about, is build the best bridge for those people to, get on the lifeboat. And again, I don't think real estate is the worst thing that you can own, but I think that it is the perfect vehicle to understand something better, whether you're talking about Bitcoin or talking about Bitcoin mining. To go back to what Sailor said before, we're just transitioning energy. Energy is stored in all of these vehicles, and when there's a better vehicle for it, that energy starts to flow out and into something else. And in many ways, what we're doing by setting up mining operations and running a mining business is creating a channel for that energy to flow through. And for sure, it's coming. It already has started in very large way. I mean, there's hundreds of billions of dollars that have been put into the mining network already. But most of the capital in the world, just by nature of the market cap, 1.5 trillion out of 900 trillion, has still not been exposed to this industry at all. And depending on how bullish you are, it may be 10% of global assets or 20% or some greater share. There's still a lot of room to run. And the only place that energy is going to come from is the existing vehicles that people store their wealth in, namely equities, real estate, and debt.
Yeah. And as the math just maths out, and as Bitcoin continues to function, I mean, it reminds me continually, even as they get into it, you feel like you were late or whatever. We're so early. You think about all that wealth put away in various other property. And if you've got property taxes, you do for land, do you ever really fully just own it? Or do you always have to pay to maintain it? So that absolute ownership property, all that wealth, seeing the path paved clearer and clearer for them and not being able to avoid it, I can just see a huge flow of focus and basically investment. So I'm hugely bullish in that regard, managing time preference as we do. Where do you see, let's step out big picture, to the extent you wish to disclose or would like to share, where can you see your Bitcoin mining operations going, Bitcoin going, abundant mines growing, moving on upriver, etc. Prospects look great to me. How might you see the next, 10 years?
Well, we have, I think, some very bold goals for the company itself. The one that I'll say that has less to do with mining is just that we want to create more Bitcoiners, and we've made a really significant effort to be great educators in this space, but I think we can reach more people, and that is really just up to us to be more skillful communicators and get a wider reach. So one of my personal goals that I've aligned the business to is, let's create the next million Bitcoiners. They don't have to be miners, they don't have to mine with us, but let's create a million more Bitcoiners and keep levering up the impact that each individual that finds this can have on everybody else in their life, and have that be our impact vehicle. For the company itself, we're very concentrated in Oregon right now. We're looking at projects in Washington, in California, in Texas, in Idaho, and really all over the place. But expansion is the name of the game for sure, and getting more creative with energy. I can't publicly talk about some of the energy projects that we have in the works because they're just that good. And honestly, it would take half an hour to explain to you even how some of them work. But our goal, one, create more Bitcoiners, give them the vehicle through mining to fulfill that dream, and continue innovating with the network itself to completely change the narrative on Bitcoin mining for even the most skeptical and resistant of critics, and make it accessible to the pools of capital that previously have sat on the sidelines, because there hasn't been a truly robust and, for lack of a better word, safe vehicle that they could really trust would work for them. So
Right.
we're multiplying over the next few years would be the short answer.
It's absolutely exciting and amazing. And tomorrow, I'm just going to bring the stage here. You've got a Bitcoin mining masterclass, how it's built and operated, with Joe and Todd. I can direct people to that. If you catch this, you can register and learn more, sign up to learn more through a masterclass here. Like I mentioned, I love the education you promote. I will direct people to your socials and etc. here. You've got a YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube at Abundant Minds. You've got continual content here. Your podcast, your clips. The signal is good and clear. I love what you're putting out there. Orange pilling people, educating people, keeping them on target. Even Instagram here, bring that up. You've got an Instagram site if you're into that. Instagram, Abundant Minds. You're on X. You can find Abundant Minds on X at Abundant Minds. Great feed. I love following it. I love reading about it. All the updates. There we are right now. And yeah, I love the multifaceted directions that you're going with this. On your website, abundantminds.com, you can read more about the services, the risks, and managing that. You've got your blog, podcast, and a newsletter. I subscribe to your newsletter. I love the content you provide in the weekly newsletter. You get it in your email. You read about it. You can click on this on your website and sign up. So you can always get that feed, sign in, get the newsletter. Anything else that I should direct people to learn more about y'all? Not to neglect the fact that you can book a free call. Pick a date and a time, get a little consultation, about 45 minutes, and get off zero, I should say, in the mining world. Get off zero, or at least in a substantial, significant way that might be more impactful than the vibe of your BitX. What else am I missing?
In the spirit of the bridge building conversation, you just built a bridge wide enough that if someone can't find a path through, yikes. There's a lot of ways that you can get involved with us.
There you go, folks.
Learning.
All the ways. Abundant Minds. Sydney, zooming out, big picture, takeaways from Portland and everything we talked about. What have you been thinking about in Bitcoin these days? I know you're a writer and you got big picture thoughts.
I think in 10 years in the future, when we look back, we will be looking at this time, I would say, as transformative as, let's say, when we look back upon the time of World War I, Roaring '20s, World War II. I think humanity is going through an incredibly pivotal moment, and it's almost as if there's a mass exodus from an old system to one that's far more hopeful and abundant and beautiful. And Bitcoin is playing a central role in that transformation. And so while I focus on many things, because I think there are so many things about that transformation, whether that be financial, whether that be scientific, whether that be political, I think all of it's shifting. I think there's a great earthquake, and I think in some ways we all can feel it. And I suppose what we're really trying to build here, like I said, Bitcoin mining is a way of converting the green into the orange, and maybe a more efficient way of doing so. And we're really just trying to build a very luxurious train. And we want to be comfortable, we want to be welcoming, we want to be educational, we want to be just truly pleasant, so that access can be as enjoyable and prosperous for as many people as we possibly can.
Well said. We're in the midst, or even just the beginnings perhaps, of basically a great realignment. And I think the future is very hopeful. And in that process, there are going to be people that don't adapt well, or you're going to see stress and strife or ruptures here and there. But some people talk of some like collapse or things. I honestly, I think it's just a giant realignment, and we're going to go through it. And yet you all are situated just right in the forefront of the future. And it's incredible to see happening. And I love the fact that you're local to us here. We're lucky to have you. I'm glad you're growing out here, and I think it's awesome. Love you guys. Is there anything before we go that you would like to get out there that I didn't already get to with all my belabored talking?
I'd say you did a fantastic job. And
Awesome.
This is very fun. For me, I can't speak for Sydney, but I thoroughly enjoyed this.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. Pleasure was mine. I'm glad to spend just a little bit of more time with you when we saw each other in Portland. It was super fun. Couldn't wait to have you on. I'm really glad to get your message out. It's always fun, but it was particularly special. And I'm glad Portland's got a conference. I'm really glad Abundant Minds really promotes it and is just a platinum sponsor. It speaks to everything you've got, values and philosophical wise. It's just signals clear. That's why I love y'all, and it was great having you on. So yes, thank you so much for being on here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
With that, we'll wrap it up. We'll catch you next time, everybody. Bye.